Today we're going to talk about social resistance in you, how to deal with unsupportive surroundings, coming up. Hey guys, it's Travis Vroman here with another daily video, and today I wanted to talk a little bit about dealing with unsupportive surroundings and what that means and how to deal with it when it occurs. So one of the things about being a game developer, especially when I wasn't doing it professionally, but even when I was going to school, was the amount of criticism that you receive. So a lot of people look at it like it's just sitting around and playing games all day to develop games. And honestly, it's anything but. And a lot of people are critical of game development because they don't understand what actually goes into it. And when I was learning how to make games, I received some criticism from friends or sometimes even family members of mine who didn't quite understand what it was that I was doing. Now, for the most part, my family was very supportive, so I want to put that out there, but being supportive doesn't necessarily mean that they understood what I was doing, and I don't necessarily hold that against them. So I don't mean to say that I came from a household that wasn't supportive whatsoever, because that's absolutely not true. I grew up in a very supportive household, and I'm very fortunate for that. But there were times when I was asked, hey, is this game development that you're doing, is it making you any money? And it was kind of hard for me to explain that at the time it didn't really matter whether or not I was making money, because I was doing something that I loved. I was being creative. And I was just getting pure joy just from being able to make games. And at the time I was still, when I received most of this criticism, I was still kind of going to college. So I was working part-time, I was going to college, and then in the time in between that, I was making games. And, I would get asked a lot, did it make money? And I would get that question not only from family, but so most of the time it was actually from friends. It wasn't from family. And I would get asked that, yeah, but did it make any money? And I'd have to say no, because I wasn't making any money from it. I had a couple of gigs that I did sort of pro bono just to kind of get the experience. And I got asked when I was working on those things, did you make any money? And I was like, no, but it doesn't matter to me. And that, they didn't get it. They didn't get that. And it was super frustrating for me to try and understand that at that point, I really didn't care about the money. I was loving what I was doing, and I was trying to hone my craft so that I could hopefully get a job making games and get paid for it. But, this industry, like a lot of others, you have to do things like interning, and you've got to spend your own time upskilling, and it takes a lot of time, and it doesn't necessarily show progress very quickly. And I found myself surrounded by a lot of people who didn't understand that. So one thing that I would run into, for example, would be I'd make a demo for something. I'd make a tech demo of some kind. And I made a lot of these, especially when I was in college. And I'd show it to my buddies and stuff, and my game developer buddies were like, oh yeah, this is awesome. But everybody else was just kind of like, yeah, but is this gonna go anywhere? Like, what are you trying to get from this? Or you're not making money, so why are you wasting your time? And they'd be like, is this for a company that you're working for? Or just questions along those lines, just sort of doubting what I was doing, and almost sort of downplaying it at the time. Some people were super, super negative about it, and that's very frustrating when you're trying to get feedback on things, and you're getting feedback on your unsolicited feedback on the direction you're trying to take with your life versus what you're actually trying to get feedback on, which is the game or whatever it is you're trying to show them to get feedback on. So the biggest issue with this was a lot of times the people that I would show my games to were the ones that I was getting negative feedback from. And it wasn't the type of negative feedback where like that was constructive, something along the lines of, hey, this game, needs a little tweaking on the graphics or the UI, or the mechanics don't feel right. It wasn't that kind of feedback. It was It was more along the lines of, what are you doing with your life type feedback. And I just learned over time that I needed to sort of adjust some things in order to be able to deal with all the negativity that surrounded it, because it was driving me nuts. It was so frustrating that I would get so much negative feedback about stuff that I wasn't even soliciting feedback for. And so one of the ways that I tried to deal with this was to limit my time around some of those negative people. Some of those people who were friends of mine or certain family members. And again, it wasn't to say that any of my family members were really negative about it, but the ones who didn't really understand, I tried to sort of limit the exposure of my game development work to them, because they didn't really get it. And I feel like on some level it was frustrating to them seeing me not go anywhere in their eyes. And I know that they wanted the best for me and that they were just concerned for me, but you know, when you're trying to split off and do your own thing, and it's not something that someone understands, sometimes you can't make them understand, and sometimes the best thing to do is just to sort of limit your exposure, the exposure of what you're doing to them. So I reduced the amount of exposure and the amount of feedback that I would ask for from some of those more negative people. And it wasn't because I couldn't deal with negative feedback about my games. It was because I didn't really want any sort of unwanted advice about what I should be doing with my life. I felt like I was more than capable of making those decisions on my own. So the first thing was to sort of limit my time around those people. And there were a few cases where that wasn't quite enough. And in this case, it was friends that I had to sever ties with, because they were just completely unsupportive about it. And even when I wasn't going to them with things that I was working on in game development, I'd just be talking to them about other stuff, and they would just constantly, they'd almost, they chide me for it, or sort of heckle me for it, and that's just not productive. And I just kind of felt like having all that negative energy around wasn't really in my best interest. And in some cases I had to sever ties with some people, and that was hard. But I think in the long run I was better off for it. Now I realize that's not always something that you can do. If it's a family member that you're dealing with, severing ties isn't always possible. Especially if it's somebody that you live with, and that's totally understandable. But there are adjustments that you can make to limit your time around them. If whenever you go to work on your game or something, just take a laptop with you and go sit in a Starbucks and steal their Wi-Fi for a bit, sip on a coffee and just work at a Starbucks, or if you're still in college, work on your games in the school computer labs, things like that. There are things that you can do to sort of get around your exposure to that negativity, if it's somebody that you can't sort of completely cut out of your life. And the third and probably most important point or thing that you can do is to set boundaries on what you're willing to accept. Draw a line in the sand and say, this is where the limit of what I'm going to accept in terms of negativity is. Take, for example, if you loan somebody a video game, and your boundary is, if they don't give you back that video game, you're not going to load video games anymore. Make that boundary, and if that boundary gets crossed, deal with it. Stick to your guns and say, no, I'm not. You didn't give me my game back. I'm not loaning games anymore. Same thing with money. If you loan somebody $20 and they never pay you back, don't loan them money anymore. Whatever boundary it is that you set, and this is, I guess, sort of a sub point of this, whatever boundaries that you set are for dealing with these negative types of people, make sure that you stick to your guns on it and don't accept it. Do whatever you can to not accept that sort of negativity. Don't allow them to step over that line that you've drawn in the sand. When you're dealing with unsupportive surroundings, limit your time around the unsupportive people, the people that are being super negative in your life. If it goes too far, sometimes the best thing that you can do is to sever ties with those people who are being super negative. And, where that's not always possible, of course, you can fall back to number one and just limit your time around them. But sometimes there comes a time when you need to sort of, you need to say, that's it. I can't have all this negativity and negative energy in my life, and I need to cut ties. And I've had to do it. It's painful. It sucks, but sometimes it's warranted. And the third point is to set boundaries and stick to them. Whatever boundaries that it is that you accept, that you personally decide that you are not going to allow anything beyond that, stick to them no matter what. And, I realize that these things sound sort of generic, and I guess they kind of are. They're pretty simple, but there's no magic bullet on how to deal with this. Everybody's situation is a little bit different. My situation probably will be vastly different from your situation. And these are the ways that I dealt with it, and it's the way that you can deal with it. It's not necessarily the right in all situations. But, yeah, that's really all I've got on this today, so I think we'll go ahead and wrap this up. Thank you guys so much for watching. If you guys have dealt with unsupportive surroundings, I'd like to hear some of your stories about that. Just leave me some comments below and tell me ways that you've dealt with unsupportive surroundings, whether it was family members, friends, whatever, and how you overcame those things, because I'd really like to know. I know this was something that I struggled with for years, and so it would be interesting for me to hear some feedback from you guys on this topic as well. So with that, thank you guys for watching. If you liked the video, please hit the like button. Please subscribe if you haven't already, and I will see you guys tomorrow.